So once again, it is my pleasure to introduce Herb Miles, the former president of PCNS multiple times over, and the distinguished member now.
All right. Now that was nice. All right, the Little Rock Nine. It's a good story. Courage, perseverance, and triumph. 9 teenagers who integrated one of the largest all-white high schools in the Deep South, in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957. Now, I have a particular interest in this story because I was born and raised in Arkansas, and one of those students could have been me. Fortunately, I was only 10 years old in 1957, not 14, 15, and 16 like the 9. So what was Arkansas like in 1957? Where I was born, Wilton, Arkansas, right here, close to Ashdown, about 5 miles away. Wilton had 300 people. Bill Clinton, former president, this is where he was born. Oh, about 60 miles from where I was born. And John A. Cash, this is where he was born, right in here, about 400 folks. And of course, people would go and see Elvis in Tupelo, right about there, Mississippi, about 600 miles from where I was. Big towns in Arkansas, Little Rock, Fayetteville, Fort Smith, even Texarkana, although Texarkana straddled the Texas-Arkansas border. And in 1957, these signs were pretty ubiquitous. Not in my small town, because there were only 2 stores. Mills General Store, which as its name implies, it was a general store. So he sold everything, tools, Levi's, other clothing, work shirts and things like that, as well as TVs and whatnot. And these other things were prevalent in Texarkana and in Ashdown. Yes, I did sit in the balcony. Yes, I did sit in the colored passenger section at the train station. Yes, I did sit in the colored section or go to the colored restroom. And yes, when we went to the hamburger place, we served colored, but it was carry out only. I don't remember swimming pool. I don't know if they ever had one. Texarkana, that would be the place to have it. So in 1896, Supreme Court ruled in Plessy versus Ferguson that separate but equal treatment was perfectly legal. Mr. Plessy was trying to sit in the white section of a train car, but he was relegated to the colored section, so he sued, but he lost. Then for 58 years, until 1954, the United States Supreme Court decided Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. And that case was only about elementary schools, but they decided 9-0 that separate was not equal and should be remedied with all deliberate speed. What do you do in a nation that's legally separating people by race? White, colored, Indian, Mexican, Malay, Chinese, Oriental, of all kinds. Who knows? Well, in 1957, 9, 14, 15, and 16-year-old Black children, they were called Negroes at the time, integrated Little Rock Central High School. Central High was one of the largest high schools in the old Confederate South, all white, about 2,000 white students. Here's the old Confederate South: Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, the Carolinas, and Virginia. You can see that Virginia is whole. There's no West Virginia. So, Central was one of the best high schools in the South. So the Arkansas NAACP determined to make it an example of what could be accomplished after the Brown decision. Daisy Bates recruited local Black honor roll students to be the first to integrate Central High. Daisy Bates was the president of the Arkansas NAACP. So who are those 9 students? Jefferson Thomas, named after President Thomas Jefferson, naturally. Melba Patillo, Terence Roberts, Carlotta Walls, Ernest Greene, Thelma Mothershed, Minnie Jean Brown, Elizabeth Eckford, and Gloria Ray. There's Daisy Bates. president of the NAACP and mentor for the students. She chose them well. Now here's a capsule history of what's happened so far. Slavery was abolished by the 13th Amendment. It was effective on December 18, 1865. Reconstruction followed for 12 years until 1877. And then there was a disputed presidential election, Chester Alan Arthur versus Samuel Tilden. Tilden received more votes, but Arthur gained the presidency because he made a secret deal with some Southern Democrats that in exchange for them giving him the 20, I believe, electoral votes that he needed to become the new president, he would withdraw the troops, which he did. Then Jim Crow followed, where the old Confederate states systematically voted in oppressive laws and restrictions on former slaves. Historians still argue over how the treatment eventually was called Jim Crow. And here's a broadside from 1866. You can see that the white person seems pretty reasonable, but the black person has heightened features. So just to make everybody scared that this black person might get a few votes. Jim Crow came from a minstrel show originated by Thomas Dartmouth Rice in 1829. And it was portrayed from that moment on by lots of minstrel places. Even black people in blackface portrayed Jim Crow. And this is where it came from. Wheel about and turn about and do just so. Every time I wheel about, I jump Jim Crow. Examples of Jim Crow laws. A person could not vote if his grandfather was a slave. And that was to get around the 15th Amendment, which said people in former servitude could vote. A laborer had to verify employment for an upcoming year and pay an annual tax. And children could be taken away from parents and forced into labor if the parents were deemed vagrants or otherwise deemed unsupportable for the children. And of course, all these signs appeared everywhere. Here are some examples of a literacy test from 1964 in Louisiana. I want you all to take a look at these and see if you can answer these. Number one, in the space below, write the word noise backwards and place a dot over what would be its second letter should it have been written forward. Number two, spell backwards forwards. Number three, print the word vote upside down, but in the correct order. And number four, write from the left to the right as you see it spelled here. There were 30 questions in Louisiana's literacy test. You had 10 minutes to answer them all. If you got one wrong, you could not vote. Here's the facade of Little Rock Central High School. So bowing to pressure from the NAACP, and actually the Little Rock School Board wanted to integrate because they felt Arkansas was in the forefront of race relations, but the NAACP put a lot of pressure on them and determined to integrate Little Rock Central High. On September 4th, 1957, the 9 were denied entrance by a mob of whites, about 400 white people, and the Arkansas National Guard. When they tried to enter the grounds of the school, the Arkansas National Guard deterred them with their weapons. The 9 attempted again 3 weeks later on September 24th, slipping in a side door of the school. But the mob gathered and they were evacuated to prevent a threatened lynching. Therefore, President Dwight Eisenhower called in the 101st Airborne to maintain order and guarantee their entrance to the school on September 25th, 1957. And this is what they look like, parading to the school with the soldiers. On September 4th, Elizabeth Eckford arrived first. She was supposed to ride with the other students. They were going to ride in a caravan of big station wagons. And there were going to be 10 students and her fellow students in big station wagons. But her family had no telephone and therefore didn't receive a call from Daisy Bates that the plans had changed. So she took a bus, arriving alone, and was met by a mob who accosted her as she walked to the school. The student in mid-year was Hazel Bryan. She tried to befriend Elizabeth later in life, but after a period of reconciliation, and you can read that in some of the books that have come afterwards, they drifted apart and so far have not reconciled. Elizabeth, probably suffering from the post-traumatic stress of that year, has just not been able to completely forgive. But Ernest Greene was the first to graduate from Central High in 1958. He did the whole year. And it was so important that Reverend Martin Luther King attended his graduation ceremony. He was offered the chance to receive his diploma in the mail, but he said, I have suffered through this whole year and I'm going to sit with all the other students. And he did. He entered Michigan State University on a scholarship by an anonymous donor and graduated with a bachelor's degree in 1962 and a master's in sociology in 1964. And that anonymous donor was the president of Michigan State University. Melba Patillo was the daughter of a mother who had a PhD from the University of Arkansas and was teaching middle school. Because Governor Orville Faubus closed all Little Rock high schools for the following 1958 to 1959 school year, Melba, with help from the NAACP, moved to Santa Rosa, California, and finished her education there. She has a master's in journalism from Columbia and has been a professor at Dominican in San Rafael. Jefferson Thomas, named after the president, graduated from Central in 1960. He attended Wayne State University in Detroit, then transferred to Los Angeles, where he attended LA State College, now California State University, obtaining a degree in business administration. He died of pancreatic cancer in 2010, so far the only death of the 9. Thelma Mother Shad is oldest of the 9 who integrated Central High. All of the Little Rock 9 had been recruited by the NAACP because they were honor roll students. Thelma was no different, so when the lost year of 58-59 occurred, she took correspondence classes, graduating and receiving her degree from Central in the mail. She attended Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, got a master's from Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, and taught home economics for many years in East St. Louis. She retired in 1994 and has moved back to Little Rock. Minnie Jean Brown was the rabble-rouser of the 9, being expelled for 6 days for spilling chili on 2 male students. After her suspension, a white student spilled soup on her. But of course, that student was only suspended for 2 days. But she was eventually expelled for calling a group of white girls white trash after they threw a purse full of combination locks at her. But after expulsion, she lived with Dr. Kenneth B. and Mamie Clark, New York psychologists, who had used their famous doll study to assist Attorney Marshall in that Brown versus Board of Education case. The doll study is fascinating, and you can see it's still done to this current day, and you can see lots of YouTube videos on it. But essentially, it was this. 4- and 5-year-old black children were shown 2 dolls, one obviously white, one black. Then they were asked a series of questions. Which is the white doll? Which is the black doll? Which doll is pretty? Which doll is ugly? Which is the nice doll? Which doll is bad? And lastly, which doll looks like you? The last question almost always made the black children hesitate. The majority picked the black doll, while a few picked the white doll. And sometimes they didn't pick any doll at all. This study was presented in the Brown versus Board of Education case and probably had a major effect on the justices who voted 9-0 that separate was not equal in education. Gloria Ray was 15 when she entered Central High. She graduated from the Illinois Institute of Technology in '65 with a degree in chemistry and math. Became a public school teacher, worked as a research assistant at the University of Chicago. In 1966, she married a Swede and worked for IBM in Stockholm. In 1976, she co-founded the journal Computers and Industry and served as its editor until 1991. She graduated as a patent attorney from an institute in Sweden and worked in this field from '76 to '81 at IBM. And she also worked at Philips Telecommunications and Philips Lighting in the Netherlands, and she still lives in Sweden. Terence Roberts was born in Little Rock and attended all black elementary, junior high, and high schools before volunteering to integrate Central High in 1957. He left Arkansas for California after Central was closed in 1958, finishing his high school in Los Angeles. He obtained degrees from California State University, LA, and earned a PhD from Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, and has taught at Pacific Union College in Napa and at Antioch University in LA. He's retired, but he still consults, and he engages in speaking events. And Carlotta Walls was the youngest of the Little Rock Nine. She was the first Black female to graduate from Central High. After graduating from Central, she attended Michigan State for 2 years, but was unable to continue because her father couldn't find work. Family moved to Colorado, where she graduated from Colorado State, now the University of Northern Colorado. And she has worked for the YMCA or the YWCA and as a real estate broker, and still lives in Inglewood, Colorado. And to the coins. This is the uncirculated silver dollar, which was minted in 2007. It celebrates 50 years from the integration of Little Rock Central High School. Obverse was designed by Richard Masters and sculpted by Charles Vickers. This is the proof. You can see the difference in the strike. You can see the initials of the designers here to the side underneath the sidewalk. So here is the reverse. What's striking to me is that the reverse for many American coins has United States of America, not the obverse. It's kind of a particular thing that we do. $1, E pluribus unum, our motto, Little Rock Central High School, United States of America. And the designer's initials hidden here in the grass, Don Everhart. And the proof. So the Little Rock Nine, the top third, has 9 stars to represent the 9 students. And liberty, one of our necessary statements in all our coins. Here's the uncirculated version of the middle part of the dollar. And you can see the big skirts, loafers, bobby socks, Mary Janes on the girls, and all those with the boys, they contrast sharply with the combat boots and the butt of the M14 of the 101st Airborne Soldier. The bottom third has desegregation in education, the date 2007, and in God we trust. I think the design is pretty artful. It would be difficult to show 9 faces of 9 teenagers on such a small palette. So the representation of their torsos and feet, I think, is a suitable alternative. It just shows the mundaneness of such a courageous act. The proof and the uncirculated together, the middle part, see the difference in stripe. The reverse, designed by Don Everhart, can also be divided into thirds. It's the denomination in E pluribus unum, and barely the top of the building's facade on the top third of the coin. Middle third has the imposing facade of Little Rock Central High School. The school is now part of the Registry of Historical Monuments. In the bottom, with the name Little Rock Central High School, P for Philadelphia, where it was minted, and United States of America. And that's what it looks like here. Did the students look like that going to school with the soldiers? Yes, they did. You can see the skirts and blouses of the girls, shirts, pants of the boys. Everybody's well dressed. And here is the medal that was a part of the uncirculated set that was struck in 2007. This is a bronze medal, and it's a copy of the Congressional Gold Medal, which was awarded to each of the 9 by President Bill Clinton in 1999. This scene is probably taken from one of the hundreds of photographs of the Little Rock Nine. It was a big deal when they integrated Little Rock High School, and all of the news media participated and took hundreds, maybe thousands of photographs. Their names are on the reverse of the medal, and the medal is in medal rotation, by the way. Ernest Greene, Jefferson Thomas, and the others. The women have their married names, Beals, Lanier, Trickey, Ware, Mark, except for Elizabeth Eckford. Act of Congress, 1998. And this is the cover of the coin and medal set with the uncirculated dollar poking through. This is what it looks like when you open up the package. The Spingarn Medal. In 1958, the Nine, along with Daisy Bates, their mentor, were awarded the NAACP's highest honor, which is the Spingarn Medal. Obverse looks a bit like this. I've seen some that don't have this obverse, but this is typical. And this is a typical reverse. I was not able to find, no matter where I looked, a representation of the one that the Nine received. And you know what? The Little Rock Nine are famous for their courage in facing discrimination, but more than 9 students were recruited by Daisy Bates. Some declined. It could have been the Little Rock 10, though, because Jane Hill had accompanied all the others on that first day on September 4th. But Jane declined to return 3 weeks later on the 25th, when the 9 officially integrated the school. So the 9 are part of history. And Jane, man, she is a memory for herself. Questions?
Is Central still functioning as an actual academic school? Well, less COVID, but what was it until COVID?
It is. It's still functioning. They can't tear it down because it's on the National Registry of Historic Places. It is majority Black now, probably 65-35. Still has a good reputation, although not the reputation it had in the 50s.
Okay.
Herb, I remember reading at the time that because they're living, their images could not be shown on the coin, and I believe the woman who's teaching in the Northern Bay Area, I believe she was one of the ones that consulted on the choice of the shoes, which in my mind was a masterful design choice in conveying what happened at that time.
I hadn't heard that, but that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I think it makes it better. It makes a better coin, in my opinion, because I would hate to see 9 tiny faces on the dollar.
Yeah, those boots along with their shoes is a really powerful statement.
Yes, I think so. Others?
Herb, what was the mintage on the coins?
That's a good question. I don't know. Not very many were sold. And I don't know that they disposed of the excess the way they do, or they sell them to the bullion dealers or whatever. But somewhere in the nature of 25,000 or 30,000 were minted, and probably fewer than that were sold. And that's together with the uncirculated and the proof.
I have a red book, and
yeah, get your red
the
book.
uncirculated is 24,720. The proof is 61,992.
Okay.
It's fairly good. Just one small thing.
Oh, I got the wrong coin. Sorry. What year is that coin?
2007.
Oh, okay. I had the other one. Okay. Uncirculated is 124,678. Proof is 66,093.
All right.
Question about the 101st Airborne. Were they there for the full school year?
No, they were there for a month, and then the Eisenhower put together an ad hoc group of National Guard and local troops, 153rd Infantry, and they were there for the rest of the year. And as a matter of fact, they accompanied the students to and from the school and from class to class for the whole year.
What happened after the year?
After the year, Governor Orville Faubus closed the high school and all of the high schools in Little Rock that the white kids were attending. And what the parents did,
it was opened
academies. Say that again, Paul?
Yeah, well then after it was opened after a couple of years, and then some of the students went back, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
It was opened in 59 to 60, and it was opened because the school board went against the governor's wishes because they wanted to integrate and try to get everything going and avoid all the trouble that seemed to be available to all the other schools in Alabama and Mississippi and so on, which they weren't integrated. So Arkansas really wanted to be first.
Yeah. So my question is, when the students went back after a couple of years, did they still have protection from officers, or did they run into a lot of trouble?
They ran into trouble, but they had no protection from officers, so they were on their own.
And were there any really serious incidents?
There were lots. I
Yeah.
mean, there were nooses hung on the trees. The kids were paint and
Yeah.
glue, and things were thrown on them. They were thrown down the stairway inside the school. They were called names. They were yelled at. They weren't called on in class unless they had a nice teacher. It was typical.
Typical.
Yeah.
Herb, one thing, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because I'm not lighting up in green. The election of 1876 the winner was Rutherford B. Hayes.
Ah,
Chester Arthur became president after Garfield was assassinated.
ah.
He was no treat, but he didn't sell out.
Good, thank you.
Just the historian in me, being
Oh, I appreciate
the
that.
historian in me.
Yes, good.
Thank you, Jason. I wondered about that too.
Okay.
Good.
Any
Anybody
other
else?
questions?
Thank you, Herb.
All
Thank
right.
you, Herb. That was wonderful.
All right. I'm unsharing
Oh,
your screen.
I actually do have a question.
Yes.
How many of the 9 have you met?
I have not met any, but I've tried my
You're kidding
darndest
me.
because a couple are in California.
Yeah.
They speak at
I just
UCLA from
expected
time
you
to
to.
time, but I've not been able to make time to do it.